You're listening to Online Pet Health Podcasts with Dr. Megan Kelly. Continuing education for veterinarian rehabilitation therapists. Learn more at onlinepethealth.com.
Hey Vet Rehabbers, welcome to the Veterinary Rehabilitation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Kelly. Thanks for joining me today. This podcast today is for our equine vet rehab enthusiasts. It is an interview between Ané Lloyd from Onlinepethealth and Sherry Johnson. She's from Texas in the United States, and she's going to chat about Western's performance horses. Really interesting chat about the different injuries they get, rehabilitation, and a little bit of information about the sport itself. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. Over to Ané and Sherry.
Welcome everyone, and welcome to Sherry Johnson. Thank you so much for joining us today. Sherry, will you share a little bit about yourself? Just introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today, Ané. I'm really excited about this and looking forward to it. My name is Sherry Johnson. I wear a couple of different hats, but one of which is I practice mostly in the Western performance horses. So I'm actually a partner in equine sports medicine and rehabilitation. It's a mobile practice that's based out of Pilot Point, Texas. So we have a mobile rig that we actually travel to most of the quarter horse and NRHA shows around the country. So excited to discuss that with you all today. And a couple of the other things that I'm involved with. I'm also one of the managing rehabilitation veterinarians of equine sports medicine and rehab. So we do have an on-site facility there in Whitesboro, Texas, where we offer on-site rehab for horses. And then a virtual version of that business is called Ecore, where my business partner and I, Dr. Melissa King, actually offer virtual tele-rehab consults to veterinarians, owners, things like that. So, and in addition to those things, I'm also a PhD candidate here at Colorado State University. Most of my research focus is in rehabilitation modalities that are novel to the equine athlete, specifically those related to tendon healing. So,
wow, that is that's quite a lot of hats, as you put it. You must be really busy.
Yeah, I am, but you know, it's a great kind of busy. I love what I do, and there's so much variety in everything that I get to do that I honestly never get bored. I can tell you that. So it's wonderful.
I can absolutely believe that. And just listening to all of those things, I mean, I would love to chat to you about your mobile rig, about the Ecore business, just so many things. I think there's so much for us to learn from you. For today, I would like us to focus just on the Western performance horses. In South Africa, it's quite a new sport that's taking off, but I know in America, it's definitely not new, and I think it's probably your biggest sport that side. Is that right?
I mean, the American Quarter Horse Association, or the AQHA, it does remain the single largest breed registry in the world. So in terms of popularity, I'm not sure I can comment on it that it's for sure the most popular, but it definitely is one of our hallmark sports over here in terms of what people do with their horses. And the branches of Western performance, you know, they go in a lot of different directions. And sometimes what I mean when I say a Western performance horse doesn't always mean the same thing to another veterinarian or even another horseman in the industry. So it's quite a varied range of disciplines, and I think that's what makes it so unique and really very, very fun to exist in that realm of practice.
So do you ride yourself?
I don't currently. I actually grew up riding horses, Western performance horses, and prepping a lot of young horses as well. So I was involved kind of in the training aspect a lot when I was younger, and I thoroughly enjoyed it going through undergrad. And I think that those skills, you know, to younger veterinarians out there, those skills of just horse handling and horse behavior and reading a horse, those were all skills that I learned in the trenches, or, in the streets of learning how to work with these horses. And that in and alone has been a skill that has served me very well throughout my career so far. But no, I don't currently show any horses. I get plenty of horse time in my life otherwise. So no, I don't currently ride.
Okay. I have to say, when I'm not riding, I miss it very quickly. So, yeah, but I do understand. I mean, we spend so much of our time hands-on around them that we end up neglecting our own babies.
Yeah.
That's certainly true for me.
They only require two things of you: time and money. And neither one of those things I've seemed to have much of recently. So that's kind of been more of the limiting factor there.
Absolutely. So, how did you tell us a little bit more about the Western performance horses? So, you mentioned that when you speak about Western performance riding or horses, there's quite a bit of variation. So, I might be thinking of something different to what you're thinking about. Is that because there are so many disciplines that get lumped under Western performance horses or Western performance riding?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the American Quarter Horse, the AQHA horse, is definitely the poster child of what a quote unquote Western performance horse means. But all of the disciplines have gotten so big that there's many different sanctions now that exist outside of the AQHA that are more discipline specific. So, like, for example, the NRHA, the National Reining Horse Association, the Cutting Horse Association, the Reined Cow Horse Association. So there's all kind of these branches of disciplines that have spawned from the AQHA or from the Western performance horse. And for the study that we discussed the other day on the webinar, that study was pretty much focused on AQHA horses and what those horses do for a living. Mm-hmm. So if we go with the broad blanket of AQHA horses, or what we call the Western performance horse, under that subcategory is all of these then different disciplines that the horses do, including reining, Western pleasure, Western riding, Western horsemanship, trail, and there's even some hunt seat classes, so some flat hunt seat classes, and the quarter horses are very talented at those as well. They do take them over fences, do a lot of cow work, even some driving classes. So the quarter horses continue to be an extremely diverse horse, able to do a lot of different things. But what's neat is the quarter horses kind of branched off into each of these disciplines. So we've got small groups of bloodlines or types of horses that are really good at doing a certain discipline within Western performance. So it's a really neat environment to be around those horses. There's always something neat to look at or think about in terms of what they do for a living, and the injuries that we see as veterinarians.
So there's quite a variety in terms of their in terms of the athletic ability that they need. So what a rail horse would be doing is completely different from what a trail horse would be doing. Is that right? And then
yeah. And I think that kind of, if you break up the classes very simplistically as a rail class versus a pattern class or a maneuver class, I think that you're not wrong to think of it that way. So, like, for example, the Western pleasure horses, they come in and they do rail work only, which means a walk, a jog, and a lope on the rail, both directions. And the style is very important of those horses. What they're judged on is very, very different than, say, a trail horse. And I think probably trail should get a very strong mention as being a discipline-specific thing. And when I say trail for the Western performance horse, it's actually a pattern class where horses have to complete specific maneuvers. So opening a gate, going over a bridge, going over poles, in different configurations at different heights. It is not trail riding. So, a lot of the world thinks about a trail horse as being, I'm going to go out in the mountains and ride. That's not what the Western Performance Show Horse Trail class means. The Western Performance Trail class is a very intense pattern class, where horses go over the poles. And one of my favorite pastimes is to go on and watch some of the best runs in the industry, and trying to get a mental picture of what those runs looked like and what those horses and those trainers and owners and riders look like when they're doing those classes specifically. It's very, very important as a veterinarian to understand what those horses are expected to do for a living, so that you can be better versed in how we can all best accomplish that. The team of, the trainer, the owner, and the veterinarian.
Mm. And I'm glad you mentioned the trail riding, because exactly as you said, I think about, I'm going for a trail ride, I'm going to pop my saddle on, let's bridle and just go out and have a lovely ride. Maybe we'll pop over some logs here and there, or certainly opening gates and closing gates, but it's just for fun. I think putting it into a class, the video that you showed in the webinar the other day was amazing. I mean, the ability of that horse to just stay rhythmical throughout the entire performance, quiet, calm, the way that they went over the poles, at an angle. Who does that? It's amazing. It was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's different, right, from the show jumpers or like the very big jumping horses. It's different, obviously, but the amount of neuromotor control, the amount of proprioceptive acuity and awareness that those horses have to have is incredible. And the role of the horseman and the horse together, that interaction, that piece is so pivotal. And not everyone has that special connection with the horses. And it's really fascinating to appreciate the horses that are at the top of their game, regardless of what discipline they're in, whether it's trail or show jumping. I think we can all appreciate a really good athletic horse when we come across it. So yeah, that video specifically was of one of my very favorite horses. So I was honored to show her.
It was beautiful, and it is interesting to think about the proprioceptive requirements and the neuromuscular feedback. Do you take some of that into consideration in a rehab program? Do you sometimes need to rehabilitate their awareness of their feet and at different gaits? Like, how do you bring the specific requirements of those horses into a rehab program?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ané. And the neuromotor control, the proprioceptive awareness is a huge pillar of our rehab programs that we're offering for these horses. And a lot of times it's analogous to human physical therapy programs. And oftentimes as equine rehab specialists, we look to and work with the human rehab arena quite a bit. So I have a lot of very good colleagues that are human physical therapists or human PhD researchers, sports medicine specialists that work with the very high-end human athletes. And I'm always trying to steal things from their world and what they're doing so that we can bring them over to our equine athletes. And the role of retraining or rehabbing the neuromotor control system is huge. And they've shown on the human side that, the role of proprioceptive awareness not only plays a role in the primary injuries healing, but also in your re-injury. So, for example, you tweak your knee, you injure your knee or your meniscus somehow. Secondarily, your joint typically responds by getting a large amount of fluid or effusion in that joint. And the human literature has demonstrated that the presence alone of that fluid alters how your body perceives your limb in space. So regardless of the original injury, now you have kind of a comorbidity that predisposes you to re-injuring or further injuring that original injury just because of your altered proprioceptive awareness. So the neuromotor control is a very big piece of what we're trying to do with these horses from a rehab standpoint. And it's always kind of ironic if I do get a horse that goes over poles for a living, like a trail horse, in for rehab, the trainers will say, well, what are you going to do to rehab? And I say, well, this is a big week. We're going to start to introduce some ground pole work. And they say, that horse has been doing that for years. So I think the trick is to reset everything. And if the horse is already very accustomed to going over the ground poles, and that's not going to be a stimulus that makes them become more aware of their limbs, and I think you have to pivot on that and come up with more creative ways to do that with other proprioceptive devices. So I oftentimes think about that and sit and wonder how we can be better at our jobs, and that's definitely a great question. So
okay, great. So I love the trail horses, and the other one that I found really interesting that you brought up in the webinar was the reining horses. And particularly the fact that the lameness pattern. Let's chat first about those lameness characters, as you call them, or the patterns that you guys found in your study. Go ahead and describe that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so to just kind of recap for those of you that haven't actually listened to the webinar on the study itself, basically what we did, we looked retrospectively at records for over 10 years. And we went through each of those records and recorded lameness exams that had been performed with diagnostic blocking. So the process of actually localizing where those horses, where the source of lameness anatomically was coming from. So out of about 8,000 different lameness exams, we whittled that down to about 2,600 exams on about 2,500 horses that met our study inclusion criteria. And again, most were on Western performance horses. And the overarching question that we were wanting to answer was, what is the most frequently identified anatomic source of pain in these Western performance horses? And is it different by discipline? So is it different by them being a Western all-around horse, meaning pleasure, horsemanship, trail, or is it different for reining horses specifically? Those were kind of our two broadest categories of horses with discipline-specific considerations. And what we found, interestingly, was that comparing the all-around Western performance horses to the reining horses specifically, all-around Western performance horses, their most prevalent lameness character of presentation was single hind limb lameness, and that was in contrast to reining horses that presented most commonly with a single forelimb lameness. And when I got that result, I kind of went, that's not what I would have thought, but that's very interesting, and a lot of times why we do these studies. So we have not investigated the statistical relationship of that. That's in the works. But it was very interesting to see that. And I've since asked many very good horsemen that I respect, like, hey, if you had an all-around Western performance horse versus a reining horse, which one do you think would present most commonly with a single forelimb lameness? And every single time they say the all-around Western performance horse, and I say, actually, it was the reining horse. So I think that was a really interesting finding of our study. Across all of the disciplines, we found that the distal forelimb was the most common source of lameness, localizing to either a PD or an abaxial or a combination of the two nerve blocks. So that was about 40% of our cases, actually. So able to quantify, about 40% of the time, distal forelimb lameness is the source of pain in Western performance horses. And that across all disciplines was second to the distal tarsus. And then third on our list was the stifle at 9%. So very interesting in trying to quantify the source of anatomic lameness in this population of horses that does this very specific thing for a living.
That is very interesting. As you said, have you thought a little bit about why would the reining horses be presenting that way? Like where is the stress building up for them to to break down specifically in that distal forelimb?
Yeah, and I don't know that I honestly have a question. It's a great question, Ané. It's $1 million question. But the genesis of our study was to just take the first step in quantifying where the primary site was, and then to kind of go from there. And a lot of questions I got around this study was, well, you found the distal forelimb, but like, what did they actually have? What was your diagnosis? And I have to say, well, it wasn't an actual focus of our study, was the specific diagnosis beyond that. But first and foremost was just to characterize the distal forelimb. And we actually have things in the works to tease out what those specific diagnoses were, diagnoses that are on the table that come to mind. Our bone bruising of the coffin bone, a coffin joint collateral ligament injury, deep digital flexor tendon or navicular bursa issues. So there's a wide range of diagnoses that live within the distal forelimb. And any, sports medicine veterinarian listening to this is going to resonate completely in that, we don't always know, or we're not able to know the exact reason that the pain is coming from that spot. But going back to the discipline specific, reining horses, what they do for a living, they do these amazing sliding stops, they do these spins, they do backing, they do loping big fast circles, small slow circles. They do all of these really exciting athletic things, and it's for sure one of the most exciting disciplines that we have within the Western performance horse world. And I don't know, I think that, the whole body, the global picture of the athlete comes into play when I think about why did they present with single forelimb lameness most frequently. So I don't have an answer, but it speaks to the athleticism of the horse that they're able to do these super cool maneuvers, and most of the time they make it look effortless. And I think that's one of the neatest things about those horses.
Yeah. I'm glad you basically answered my question before I was going to ask it about what diagnoses are you getting, what pathologies are you getting, and I know that wasn't the focus of your study, but it is the natural sort of question to ask, and I love these retrospective studies because it is so valuable for us to look at what we've done and just put it all into perspective. For us to just think about the past 10 years, there's no way that you're going to come to the conclusion that actually the distal forelimb is most commonly affected in reining horses versus in the other disciplines. So I think that there's so much for us to learn from that, and I find it very discouraging when people are critical of research that has been done, saying that, but what about this and what about that? So I just wanted to say an encouraging word on that, and that I love it and that it's great. And I get really excited about research, and that I get really excited about all the questions that come up around it. And that's the purpose, right? For us to start asking more questions, and thinking about more possibilities so that we can get more answers.
Yeah, definitely. And this is far from a perfect study, Ané. It certainly is not going to go down as one of the brain busters of the century, but I think we have to start somewhere, right? And that the perfection piece should never stop you from doing something, and that is a rule that I live my life by, and forging on even when it's not perfect. It's not a perfect study, but it gives us a place to start. And the best part was that this caseload that we had access to, that was the genesis. It was like, well, we have this tremendous caseload of this very specific type of horses, and our practice is so dedicated to this type of horses. And I have worked with many phenomenal veterinarians in my career that are at the top of their game at whatever discipline, the 3-day eventers, the show jumpers, the dressage, all of those sports medicine veterinarians, regardless of what type of horse they're working on, they all can appreciate a good athlete. They all can appreciate the love of the sport and the love of those horses in that sport. And I think we need to start capitalizing on everything that we're doing in the industry and start sharing the knowledge with each other, because I think there's tremendous potential there. And so we were really excited to put this study out, and we're excited to get it into into a formal publication. We're definitely working on that. This was just kind of the beginning step. So there will be more to come. So
I'm very glad to hear that, and we're definitely going to be looking out for it. So with that, I think thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
We really look forward to having some more of you and chatting about some more things. So thank you so much, Sherry.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ané.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Vet Rehabbers, thanks for listening to my podcast. Don't forget to click the subscribe button, and it would be great if you could leave me a review. I want to know, what are you doing on the 15th to the 17th of November? It is our Vet Rehab Summit, which is our online virtual conference for veterinary rehab professionals. Find out more information at onlinepethealth.com.